These actions are deplorable, depraved, and disgusting. It's a priority for the Department of Justice to protect children and take down pedophiles like Robert John May.
The arrest of a high-profile, now former state lawmaker on stomach-churning charges. Now R.J. May waits to learn his fate from a federal judge. We look back at one of the biggest political stories of the year.
Very interesting that such a thing would even happen, but I'm confident that we will find out exactly everything that we want to know.
And we've called it the state's billion-dollar blunder. All fingers pointed at one man over this, the state treasurer. To his credit, though, Curtis Loftus came on this very show to defend himself. As it turned out, the missing money wasn't missing at all.
South Carolina is no safer now than it was 35 days ago, than it was when executions restarted here in South Carolina.
I don't believe that the state should be involved in killing people. I think that we should be working towards, again, the South Carolina that values life from womb to tomb.
And the death penalty in South Carolina, 7 inmates executed in a little more than a year, 3 by the first ever firing squads in this state. Those cases reigniting the debate over capital punishment in South Carolina.
We had probably 30 or more insurers in the state that would quote us every year. And this past year, it was down to 2 or 3. So some places are just simply going to close because nobody will insure them, and you cannot have a license unless you're insured.
And the cost of doing business, many bars and restaurants shutting their doors in the last year or so, saying the price of liquor liability insurance was simply too high. State lawmakers took some action to fix it, but some say it still wasn't enough. It is Sunday in South Carolina as we look back at some of the biggest political stories of the year. This week's Connect to the Capitol starts right now.
The evidence obviously was overwhelming, so this gives us certainty that he pled to 5 counts and he will serve time.
It's disgusting. I'm hoping that the judge will view this as a max sentence. We need to send a message, a strong message in South Carolina. And I think RJ needs to serve, in my opinion, at least the rest of his life behind bars.
The arrest of R.J. May, one of the biggest and most shocking stories of the year to come out of the State House. The co-founder of the controversial Freedom Caucus, arrested on 10 federal child porn charges. The details of that case beyond troubling. In just a few weeks, May will be sentenced and could be put away for decades. Here's a look back at the immediate aftermath of that arrest with Dave Wilson and Catherine Glenn Foster. But this indictment that you have right over there, this is some disturbing stuff.
This is the kind of thing that, you know, unless you have experience with this kind of thing, with reading about it, with addressing it, with fighting it, and a pretty strong stomach, this isn't the kind of thing that ordinary South Carolinians should be reading. It's that level of disturbing.
We're talking 22 pages of an indictment, and the descriptions. The descriptions themselves are difficult to read because the descriptions are pornographic, and you see what has gone on, and the fact that any attempt, let's just be honest, any attempt to turn around and say, well, I was hacked, and you look at the evidence that comes off of phone usage and social media usage and how other searches were done on opposing candidates while you're on a fake account.
On some of the fake accounts.
That sort of stuff just cannot hold up to some sort of defense of, oh, I've been hacked.
Right. I mean, the same device, the same IP address was used to, you know, call his wife, text, "Amen, Happy Easter," you know, and then access and distribute and request more child pornography.
Right.
And so this back and forth, the pattern that was established in this indictment really is damning.
So keep in mind, an indictment is basically what you have been accused of, but we still have the rule of law that you are innocent until proven guilty.
As we heard the U.S. Attorney say.
And so in this particular case now, this will eventually go to trial, but the big thing towards the end of the indictment was, keep in mind, this is a person with 2 young kids at home, and some of the searches that were being done, some of the evidence that was there are of children of similar ages.
We're talking about 6 to 10 years old,
Right.
same age range as his
As his own children.
Right, prepubescent
Right.
children. And so in that case, and some of the videos, most of the videos in fact, were describing activity with toddlers, boys
Right.
and girls. So we're talking about a very disturbing situation here, and we really just need to take a step back as well, because as we know, as Brian Sterling said, innocent until proven guilty. But we do know beyond a shadow of a doubt that these videos exist and that they depict sexual activity with children.
Yeah.
Now, we're not saying that he was doing
Correct.
that, but he was trading on a
Thus the
pornographic
distribution
social media
charge.
platform.
Right.
He was trading videos with other people and requesting types of videos at the same time.
Right, that's what's been alleged
Right.
and what the state is going to try to prove.
Right.
The case and the indictment looks pretty straightforward.
It does.
But as I was saying, though, no matter what, even if somehow he was hacked, and if there's some way that someone can get into your phone and do these things on your same device as you're texting your wife and engaging in legitimate activity, nonetheless,
And
these
searching up
videos-
your opponents.
Right. But
Political
nonetheless, these videos exist, and these children have been abused.
Right.
And so we have to think of them first,
Yeah.
and about protecting all the other children in our community, because these poor children who just need to be rescued. And so we need to pray and we need to act.
Yeah, action. That's the second part of this story. And some of the statements that have been coming out from both sides of the aisle. We had the Democratic Party chair saying, hey, it's time for action. Let's hold people accountable. Let's not wave the flag of your own party. Republicans control the state. So they're saying, let's hold this man accountable if it comes to be that this is a guilty verdict. The Attorney General Alan Wilson on Friday saying no one is above the law. We are all about protecting children. The House Speaker suspended May immediately after the charges. We will not see him back in that state house. But
And we will not see him out of jail either,
Or
because
out of jail. He'll be there
bond was not set. There was no bond set.
Stay in jail
Right.
until trial is what it sounds like, according to that
Right.
judge. I'm sure that he'll have attorneys revisit that, and they will try. But there's another one that came in from Representative Jermaine Johnson, who said he called the allegations disturbing, but he also went to the next level. He said, we aren't doing enough in this state to protect our children. The Internet Crimes Against Children units, they need more funding. That can only be done at the State House. We know that the Attorney General pushed hard on that this year. Got
Right.
some laws passed to
Exactly.
help better attack these type of criminals online. But the money is another different animal.
It sure is, but you're right. Alan Wilson, our Attorney General, has repeatedly called for greater enforcement, greater tools to be able to use. And even a couple of weeks ago, that week when I was gone, when I was stuck on that plane in D.C. for a few hours, back and forth to the gate, you two were talking about the AI porn issue.
Yes.
So across the board, this issue of pornography keeps coming up, these cyber crimes, and how we're going to best address them. Representative Johnson is correct. We need to analyze and figure out how exactly we're going to attack this in a more effective way, because after the fact, as the indictment said, it's often a stroke of luck when you have a law enforcement officer who happens across one of these secret video trading rings, and then once someone is caught, they really have to be in jail, because you can't monitor everyone's every device. These things are being traded around on cell phones, and without parole officers coming in and searching your home on a basically daily basis, I think it said basement to attic, there's no way to do enforcement, and parole can't even do that.
Yeah.
And so that now leaves us at a place where we have been talking about various laws that have been put into place. Representative Brandon Guffey out of York County, one of the original laws along this line was the law that was created after his son committed suicide after
It was an online
Sextortion.
Revenge porn.
Yeah.
And so we're watching these things begin to spin themselves out. And I think what we're seeing now is the natural evolution of pornography's impact as we're seeing it playing itself out, being so readily readily available. And that's where the state of South Carolina has put some limits on what's there and what you have access to by cutting off groups like Pornhub and other pornographic sites that cannot be accessed without some level of age verification. But again, we're talking a state representative in his mid to late 30s. In a situation like this, this is the sort of thing that's also having some other repercussive impacts, because keep in mind too, he is also one of the founding members of the Freedom Caucus.
Which he's no longer a member of.
No, he's no longer a member of that, and that has caused a huge bit of rift among the Republican majority that exists in the House of Representatives.
So there it is, just a review of one of the biggest stories of the year there. And of course, the next chapter of that will be playing out at sentencing in federal court just a few weeks from now here in Columbia. When we come back, we look at another one of the big stories, liquor liability insurance. Sky-high prices put a lot of bars and restaurants out of business, but a lifeline, as they called it, was extended to them. We're going to take a look at that when we come back.
Where we had probably 30 or more insurers in the state that would quote us every year. And this past year, it was down to 2 or 3. So some places are just simply going to close because nobody will insure them, and you cannot have a license unless you're insured.
The price of doing business proving to be too high for some bars and restaurants in South Carolina. The cost of liquor liability insurance became sky high, and the numbers of insurance vendors was too low. So lawmakers did take some action this year to help with that. There was plenty of thank yous about it, but there are still some questions that remain about what else needs to be done to help keep businesses afloat, and there likely will be more. The mandatory $1 million of liability insurance off the books, but this issue likely could be addressed again when the legislative session starts in January. Here's a look back at that one.
Since January, since we started looking at issues, we talked about liquor liability in South Carolina, I think, every single week. At least for a few seconds. We committed entire segments to it.
Yeah, we did.
We've reached somewhat of a finish line here. Let's talk about the plan that was signed into law, because everyone that spoke at that news conference the other day said we're not done yet.
They're not done yet because they only addressed the beginning sections of the issue. And that was what is preeminent right now for what you're seeing in local restaurants and local businesses across the state of South Carolina. More than 5,000 businesses have shut down over the last several years because the cost of doing business has been so absolutely high, because liquor liability insurance is something that could be anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 to $30,000 a month. And when you think about that, that's a lot of food, beer, wine, liquor that has to be sold at a restaurant to not only, Brian, support the business, but to pay for the staff. And we had Chris Fitz from the Hollow here in Columbia. We had him on a few weeks ago, and if you haven't caught that Connect to the Capitol Extra, please make sure that you do that, because he did a great job of explaining what does this mean when you take a look at how a business even thinks about growing. As you heard at the beginning of the show here, Senator Johnson said we have made a step forward by reducing the amount of insurance costs for businesses if they're doing certain things. Training for the employees. Do they close a little bit sooner?
Close by midnight.
Right. And so that has a huge impact on what goes on with business. And business can be doing those things that actually allow them to reduce their costs.
Significantly. Because before they had to carry minimum of a $1 million liability insurance. Now it's knocked back to $500,000.
Right.
If they do some of the things you just mentioned.
And it's just very familiar with what you're used to when you take a look at, do you have a good driving record? Do you have that little thing that you put in your car that, you know, measures how much your driving is? And those are things that are being done right now that allow businesses to say, we'll be good, responsible members of our community. Please lower our rates. But Brian, the big issue that we're facing right now is that took care of half the issue. The other half is, how are we going to handle other things that have to do with insurance and insurance reform in South Carolina, which is really what the Senate, because, you know, they debated
spent a month talking
They spent
about
a month talking about this. So they have taken the first bite at the apple. Do not be surprised if they don't come back. Probably not in January to deal with this issue again, because there are a lot of other things, but expect in future legislative sessions that they're going to be tackling much larger issues. The House handled the entire issue in a day.
and passed it without any
Unanimously.
opposition.
Right, and so what you
Zero.
saw with the Senate was the long deliberative process of what are we going to be doing on all of the different aspects of insurance, liability. When you've got both the injured, you've got the insurance company, you've got the lawyers, and in the middle, you and me and the rates that we pay and the cost of going out to dinner.
Yeah.
And that's really what
And the
boil
people
down
who
to.
are serving you your dinner, they get to stay on the job.
They do, and that's a huge part because you remember what it was like during COVID when you had restaurants and bars that could not remain open and so many of them shut down. And then this was on top of it. This is hopefully a good first step in keeping one of the major industries in South Carolina, which is the hospitality industry, keeping them in business.
All right, so more to come on that one, and more to come this week when we come back. Remember all that money that was supposedly missing here in South Carolina that really wasn't, but there was a heck of a lot of drama around it. We look at that when we come back.
Very interesting that such a thing would even happen, but I'm confident that we're going to find out exactly everything that we want to know.
The $1.8 billion was never missing. It has never been hidden, ever.
That's a story that played out for about 2 or 3 years, came to a head here in 2025. Nearly $2 billion in state money seemingly unaccounted for. Everyone blamed the man you heard from there, State Treasurer Curtis Loftus. The Senate called impeachment hearings, voted to impeach Mr. Loftus. House lawmakers, though, never took up that issue, so Loftus is still standing, planning to run for re-election. Here's a look back. We were talking about this a week ago. Here we are again after another lengthy hearing where we brought in the auditors that looked into the
$3 million.
The $3 million paycheck auditors
that we paid to check and say, where is our monopoly money here?
Yes. They have a lot of data. They have a lot of information. They are the ones who determined that the money never really existed that we thought we had in our state bank accounts. And Larry Grooms, again, he had a lot of questions. He's been the driving force for months on this fiasco, for lack of a better term. But where do we go now? We still don't know what's happening here, I don't think.
At least we're starting to get some answers finally, and that's what that $3 million bought us.
Yeah, real money.
Real money.
Not monopoly money like
Yes.
the $1.8 billion.
True, but at this point, a small price to pay to start to figure out where the breakdown was in the system. So we know now how it happened, basically. You know, we're changing financial systems. We thought it would kind of come out in the wash, and then it didn't. We just pretended that if we buried our head in the sand, that it would all resolve itself, and it didn't happen. And so now we're having these hearings to try to figure out why we're here.
Well, the other part about it is when you take a look at the fact that the state, back in 2007 and 8, we're switching over from one accounting system to another, and the banks switch over at the same time. They really thought that this was going to boil down to, okay, once everything's moved over, because keep in mind, there are hundreds of bank accounts and different accounts where money's set aside for different departments, different agencies. And so as that money was transferred over from one to another, they recognized, okay, the number here doesn't match up. So we'll just say that there's an amount of money that's missing. We're not quite sure, and eventually it'll all come out. And it didn't. And so this has been going on as the auditors went back to 2015 and said, okay, we're going to anchor to this point, 10 years back, and we know the books were good here. And as they watched the system transfer over, they began to go, wait a minute, here's where we're beginning to see this. But the reality, Brian, is somebody should have been doing that same type of work in state government for the last 10 years. Because when it first came out, somebody said, well, maybe it's close to 3.5 billion. And they said it's actually like 1.8. The hard part of this, though, is what the treasurer did when he was testifying, saying that we've actually made somewhere close to $200 million
It was $218
in interest.
or $220 million, I think.
So how do you make $218 million in interest
on something that doesn't exist.
Exactly.
I wish I could do that.
That would be really nice.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think when we talked about this last week, Representative Heather Bauer from Richland County basically said, listen, we're going to impeach the attorney, no, excuse me, then we're going to impeach the treasurer here because somewhere along the way, somebody didn't do what their job was.
Do you expect action on that this coming week? Because again, last week, the session was off. They're on break because of the inauguration. Do we expect maybe some steps to be taken in that direction this week, do you think?
The House is going to be supposed to be meeting on this.
Yeah.
Senate Finance has been meeting on this. Will a Republican Speaker of the House allow a Republican treasurer to actually be impeached? I think they should go ahead and go through the process if the questions are not answered.
Yeah.
If the questions even are answered, and it points back to that office, something's going to have to be done.
And in this situation, Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. Excuse me. And this is a situation where, with the treasurer, it's almost a dog ate my homework excuse. And if you're parents out there, and if your kid came and said, the dog ate my homework, so I couldn't turn it in, that's why my grade has failed. You wouldn't accept that. You would say, no, get back in your room and do your homework. And that's what we haven't seen here. We're letting the treasurer get away with, essentially lying, it seems, or certainly a gross mistake of a statement to say that money was actually invested. We cannot lose track of $1.8 billion. That's a little more important than the math homework, and yet it goes back to the same thing. It's back to the same calculator or abacus. It's just a question of how are we going to actually make sure that it happens.
Well, the initial reaction in the wake of what was a controversy there many months ago, and it seems the dust has completely settled on that. But who knows? You never know in the state of South Carolina. When we come back, we look at capital punishment here in the Palmetto State and whether it's going to be kept around when we return.
South Carolina is no safer now than it was 35 days ago, than it was when executions restarted here in South Carolina.
I don't believe that the state should be involved in killing people. I think that we should be working towards, again, a South Carolina that values life from womb to tomb.
The death penalty here in South Carolina, 7 inmates executed in a little more than a year. 3 by the first ever firing squads in South Carolina. Those cases now have reignited the debate over capital punishment in this state. As of right now, no more executions are scheduled in the state. And while that plays out, there could be a push to eliminate it in South Carolina when the legislative session starts next month. Dave and I looked back at the state's last execution. That was in November.
On Friday, the state of South Carolina carrying out its 3rd execution by firing squad. Stephen Bryant, convicted of a killing spree back in 2004. 3 people killed over a several-day period here in the Midlands. One of the victims was shot, his eyes burned with cigarettes, and Bryant writing on the wall in the victim's blood. Here in South Carolina, this could be the last death sentence carried out for at least several months as they worked their way through that backlog when things were put on pause for about a decade here along death row. Firing squad, Dave Wilson, that's 3 methods of execution now we have seen just in recent months. But what you're saying is there could be some movement at the State House come January to start changing how we dispense justice in this state.
There is a bill that's going to be coming out in January to eliminate the death penalty in South Carolina. Some groups have been calling for it for quite a while. We've had Reverend Hillary Taylor on the show several times talking about that because they want to eliminate this, saying that it's cruel and unusual. Now, the Supreme Court has said that it's not, but the legislature is the one to decide because remember, there are only 3 forms of execution that are available, and inmates have to choose which one they want to have. They can either have the firing squad, which has now happened for the 3rd time. There's lethal injection, and there's the electric chair. And all 3 have been used in the last decade since we've been having executions. Well, not since we've had executions going back on. They've only been through a lethal injection and with the firing squad. But that 3rd option is also available. They have to have at least 2 to choose from. And now that we have that in place, we've had a long spree of executions in South Carolina because there's been that backlog, Brian, now for 10 years, and that got reinstated just this past year.
So something to watch again come January, and we'll see that debate pick up here very, very soon.
Yep, legislative session begins in about 3 weeks here in South Carolina. So that was a look back at some of the biggest stories here in politics in South Carolina this week on Connect to the Capitol. We hope everyone has a happy new year as we get down to New Year's Eve, and we will see you again in a week. Have a good one.